Hello, beautiful souls. I am Valeria Maritza, your host here at Healing Through You. I am an infinite being of light, and so are you. My guest today is Kristen Becker. I am so excited to bring her in today. She's a powerful, intuitive, mystic, beautiful woman. So let's just say hi. How are you? I'm so glad to have you here today.
Hi, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to a fun, magical conversation.
Yes, our conversations have always been magical. And just for the audience, for you guys to know, Kristen and I met when at the very beginning of my experience, when I was first working with my gifts and practicing. And Kristen was one of the first people who allowed me to have space so that I can practice my gifts on her. So thank you. And that's how we met.
Yes, quite a few years now.
I know. It just feels like it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So there's hope for anyone who's going into the spiritual realm and going into this different place, and you might be feeling alone or like no one understands you. We're leaving behind a lot of people who are no longer resonating with us, but on the other side, we are connecting, making new connections, and creating these relationships with people who are more aligned with us, like Kristen and I. Uh, so, Kristen, let's just get straight to it. You had a couple of near-death experiences, did you not?
Indeed, I did. So my first one was when I was 18 years old. And I, up until that point, had lived a very 3D life. I grew up Catholic and um, sort of lived a lot of what comes with that. I grew up actually in a very stable and normal, loving home. And when I went away to college at Georgetown University, which some of you may know is a Jesuit institution, I had already sort of separated from the Catholic Church in terms of beliefs, but there was still that sort of history of what reality is and all of that that goes with it, the afterlife or not, that was sort of percolating in the back of my mind. And it was always a high achiever. So I got to Georgetown, everything is going great. Um, but in retrospect, I think I was making a lot of choices that weren't in line with my soul's values. And the weekend before Thanksgiving of my freshman year, myself and I think six friends from my dorm were setting out from Georgetown, which is in Washington, D.C., to go into more rural Virginia to the Luray Caverns to go spelunking. That's cave exploring. So we left first thing in the morning. I had already gotten up and gotten bagels. It was early enough. Um, None of us had gone out or partied the night before because we were getting up at the crack of dawn. And off we went. And as we were leaving DC, passing through Falls Church, my friend driving an SUV, a large gust of wind came and sort of really swept our car off onto the shoulder of the road. And as the driver struggled to retain or regain control, she overcorrected and the car ended up going down the highway perpendicular. And we did flip over three times. I was sitting in the passenger seat. So when everyone else got out of the car, there was a mess. There was fluid running down the highway, and people were really shaken. I did not get out of the car. And the last thing I remember was being upside down and thinking, wow, I've never been upside down in a car before. Oh no, the bagels have spilled because I got bagels and I could see there were bagels on the dashboard and I was really concerned that the bagels were now going to be ruined. And then I thought, oh no, I think we crashed. I hope that I'm okay. And that's the last thing I remember for literally months. So, um, what had actually happened was I had a terrible impact on my forehead. My spleen ruptured because it contacted the center console. And I lost a lot of blood. So a lot of what the fluids that were running down the highway were a combination of antifreeze and my blood. So luckily, we were like 2 minutes from a hospital, and a medical professional who was driving to work and had one of those like old-fashioned cell phones that was like a whole suitcase contraption called and said, send an ambulance. So they got me in really quick. I was code blue, no blood pressure, no, I wasn't breathing. It was pretty bad. And that's the 3D version of my near-death experience.
Wow. I find it really interesting that you're like finding yourself upside down. You're like the first thing that comes up to you is like, oh, I've never been like upside down in a car before. Like it's such a human thing to think.
Yes. And also notice my innate 3D training. I'm worried about bagels. I'm literally dying, and I'm like, oh no, we can't not waste the bagels.
I had a car accident when I was about 19 or 20. It was around New Year's Eve, and a car hit us, hit our car on the passenger side, so where I was sitting. And I hit my head on the windshield, came back, and I was wearing this brand new white silk jacket that I had gotten for Christmas. And I kind of lost consciousness for a little bit. And then when I woke up and I looked down and I see blood on it, and the first thought was like, oh, my brand jacket.
So I can't say that I would think differently in that situation because it sounds like a really nice jacket.
And I'm thinking, when you said that about the bagels and being upside down, I'm like, yeah, I had a very
Yeah,
thought, it's like this is what goes through our minds. Yeah,
yeah,
when something happens. That's just interesting.
totally. So I'm in the hospital. I have no blood pressure. My spleen is leaking poison into my blood, and um, they can't operate to take the spleen out because I'm not stable enough. So my parents received a call, hey, your 18-year-old daughter was in an accident. She's probably not going to make it.
Oh,
Yeah. So my dad froze. My mom came home and she was like, what time are we going? And he's like, going where? And she said, to Washington to be with Kristen. So I think they must have flown down. They sent my brother to a friend's house. So I have a brother who's 7 years younger than I, and I did make it. And I think what I've come here to talk about is the sort of in-between time of when I had the accident and when I came out, and sort of the broader meaning and impact that that's had on my life as a being. So, as I mentioned, I had a really big bump to the head. I remained in a coma or a concussive state, somehow asleep and non-responsive, for several days afterwards. I also sustained short-term memory loss. So if I knew you from before the accident, every time you walked in, I'd be like, hey, how's it going? Which was really weird for people who had known me since birth. It also meant that if you told me something and then you came back an hour later, I would have forgotten. So that was interesting. The physical healing, I don't have any conscious memory of because that would have been recorded by my short-term memory, which wasn't functioning normally. I think there were some concerns about whether I would have lost some function, some innate intelligence, some memory, or things like that. I don't remember being worried about that because I don't remember anything. But going back to those moments when I had arrived at the hospital and it wasn't sure whether I was going to live or die, I always had an inner knowing that something miraculous and special had happened, but I couldn't make sense of it with my 3D brain. And people would ask me like, oh, do you remember? Was it terribly painful? And I'm like, beats me, because I couldn't remember. A friend of the family who I had known since I was like 5 said, oh, good. It's good that this happened. Maybe this will knock some sense into her. And I remember thinking, wow, well, that doesn't seem very compassionate. And I don't think I really like or trust you anymore. Like, I really didn't resonate with that person um, because I felt that she had blamed me.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, I think she was probably reflecting back a part of myself and helping me to understand that there might be some other meaning further than just what the 3D was. So maybe it could be an opportunity for me to shift. Did I take that opportunity in the moment? No, no, I did not.
You're 17 years old.
Yeah, 18 years old. Yeah, I
18.
and I couldn't remember anything. So what happened to me when I was on the table, what we haven't discussed is I do have, in specific terms, is I do have some intuitive gift, and I am able to revisit places in time and space using a flip function. So how it stays in my memory is like things stay in other people's camera rolls. I can often flip back. Oops, I've gone a little too far, flip forward. Until I had a gift reading like 7 or 8 years ago, I assume that's how memory works because you always think that your own memory is normal. And the person who performed the gift reading, she was like, wow, I've never seen this before. I was like, oh, really? So I flipped back in my memory and I went to that moment where I was sort of in that nether region.
In
And I
between.
realized I could see I could see myself on the table. I was looking down on myself and I thought, wow, that's weird. I did not feel any pain. I did not feel any fear. I did not feel any resistance, but I was acutely aware I could tap in to I'll call it abject terror of all of the medical professionals who were working on me. They were terrified because I was on the way out. And
Oh.
yeah,
So wait. So you could tune into each medical professional that was there. Was it at the same time? Was it individually? How was that?
I could sense the collective energy. And if I wanted to tap into any individual, I could. So one of the people that was working on me was especially distraught because they had had a similar thing happen and they were unable to save the person. So they not only were saving me, they were saving that person. They were like writing because they felt that they felt that it was somehow an injustice and that they contributed to it. So they wanted to right the wrongs of the world by saving me. Another one was like, oh my God, her parents, her parents, her parents. Um, a younger doctor, I don't know what their role was, saw himself in me, was thinking like, this person is not so different than I am. The surgeon who actually sewed me up and saved my life also went to Georgetown and saw himself in me. So it was a real interesting I just got chills when I said this. It was an interesting coming together how each person who was working their hardest to save me was relating to me and seeing themselves in me. So really coming together. We are all one, but we're all coming at it from a different, unique perspective.
Wow, I love that. I don't think I have heard that before. with other NEDs, Ds.
Yes.
Sorry, I always get those two backwards. So interesting. Okay, so then what else happened from there? What else do you remember from visiting that?
So in that time, I got to understand how my life was so valuable to other people, both in supporting my own unique being, not what I was doing. Nobody was saving me because I was a high achiever or because I had done a certain thing, but because I deserved to be here and they were saving me. And I got the opportunity to be something for them. So feeling like they are all of that, all of those years of study, all of that hard work, all of that, let's drag myself out of bed at 5 a.m. to be here. So I'm here at 9:37 a.m. and this teenager who's dying rocks up so that I can be a part of the how in saving her and continuing our world. So I had no idea of that as it was unfolding, probably because I was busy trying not to die. But I remember wondering, am I going to die? But not feeling distress, not feeling resistance, not, it was more of a sort of just simple contemplation as opposed to like, is this the end? More of like I wonder if I should go to Whole Foods. That insignificant. So was not very tied to the idea of dying or not dying. I did not experience any religious figures. I did not see a light. But I knew in with my inner being that that's where I was.
Well, these are memories that you had when you went back in time and put
Yes.
yourself in that space, right? It wasn't like
Yes.
you remember that from that moment as it was happening, right?
Yes, that's correct. Because at that particular point, I had no, my body lacked the, or I guess I'll say my body, mind, spirit didn't have the ability to retain memories because
Mm-hmm.
I was so concussed and my head injury was so bad that I didn't have the ability to retain memories. And it is a little weird to have sort of like a black hole for an undefined amount of time in my past. In retrospect, I meditated on it. And I believe that it was sort of almost a Christ consciousness sort of thing. So for those of us who grew up Christian, um, Jesus was on earth in man, physical meat suit form, was crucified. And then for 3 days, he was sort of buried, presumed dead. There's a black hole. We don't really know what happened to him in that space and time. And then he reemerged as the new and improved ascended, or not ascended, but like risen from the dead Jesus. Not at all saying that I'm Jesus, but I am saying that I had a devastating crisis, which kind of ended my life, then a sort of pause where I was in a bit of a vacuum, where my physical was functioning somewhat okay, but my consciousness was sort of rejiggering. And I think it may be a sort of metaphor about how things work or how things can work. If
Amazing.
that
I
makes
love
sense.
that. Yeah. I also love the whole connection of my body, me, myself, serve as a mirror for each one of these doctors and medical staff so that they can come through something, so that they can complete something. And that's something that we don't get to see a lot, because a lot of times, like, this happened to me as opposed to for me. And we don't
Yes.
really get to see the big why or the big how, like that saying that says, we don't know what's in store for us, but there's always a better thing. And that's one of those statements that I believe in, but at the same time it's like really annoying.
Yes.
Right? When you're
Like,
in the
can you just
middle of
say
it,
what it is? Yes.
like, what? Like, this could not be good for me, right? Once you're in it.
Yes.
But I love that you were able to see that, how you being there almost dying and having this professional save you help each one of them differently according to their life paths. It's just, I love that whole connection.
Yes. So that was miraculous. And then once I kind of got back on my feet and I started going to school again, Georgetown being a Jesuit institution has mandatory theology. So you have to take two theologies. One is the problem of God, which considers the being of God from different Judeo-Christian standpoints. And the other one is an elective. So I was considering the problem of God and what is God's role, kind of what is God. And I realized so many people were saying, oh, you are so lucky. And I was saying, what the heck? I'm not lucky. There were 6 other people in that car. Everybody else walked away. I end up getting like beaten up. My memory is gone. I almost died. I have this scar on my forehead. How is that lucky? And I was mad. I was mad at God. I was mad at me. I was like, if this is how it works, how am I ever going to feel safe? If this is God, do I even want this? So I would say that that sort of like evokes an existential depression because of the utter powerlessness that I felt. Because I was
So at this point, you had not gone back to see what you just shared,
correct.
right? So at this point, you're
Yes.
just like, I can't remember anything, and this happened to me, and you're in that. Okay.
Yes. And I was
Mhm.
only seeing the 3D aspect of it. I also saw God as something outside of myself that judged and made things happen, and there was no connection. Everything was random, and you get what you get and don't have upset. And you get what you get and you don't get upset. Yeah. So did that answer the question?
Yes, yes. Okay, so now you're going through life angry. And I've heard this from a lot of other people who have had that experience of going past the veil and coming back, so to speak. And a lot of them do get angry, and then a lot of them do go through a depression. What I have found from other people who have had that experience is that depression comes from having seen the other side and being in that blissful, like, everything is beautiful here, and now I have to go back to the 3D, very difficult life, and that's where the depression comes from. Do you feel that maybe part of your depression could be that you did experience that, but you didn't remember it, and now you're here in the 3D feeling the density and all those things?
So I think it is the idea of what you said, which is I experienced non-resistance. I saw my life with my life in this physical body and this identity as um with the levity that one would consider a cup of coffee. Am I gonna die? Am I not gonna? Oh, let's just see how this unfolds. And that had to be life-changing. The idea that bad things can happen, quote, at random, and that there's nothing I can do about it. So tapping into the victim mentality, not taking responsibility or agency for one's path, and only being able to see what happens through the eyes of the 3D. So not saying like, wow, I had all of these opportunities, I touched all of these people, and I'm actually fine now and doing a little better, which is how I view it now. But at the time, I wasn't able to see that. I went on to have several other near-death experiences. One, after making some choices that really didn't honor me. So to briefly summarize decades of my life after the accident, I was fine. I graduated college, went on to grad school, worked, had a career, got married. And while I was married, I manifested some pretty severe health problems that were really difficult to define. They didn't fit into a 3D medical box. Was it my spirit letting me know that I was out of spiritual and emotional alignment? Probably. But I didn't understand that it was that at the time. So I pursued answers, I pursued medicine, and I looked for answers externally when the answer should have best been understood inside of me. So I think my next near-death experience was I manifested a broken hip and a hip replacement. And I lost a lot of blood. Like usually hip replacements are very straightforward, easy. Sometimes they'll do it as a day case even. Lost a lot of blood. It's pretty bad.
And I'm getting here, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm
Yeah,
getting
go
like
ahead.
the life force energy is leaving your body. And this is the second near death experience. Second time you're like, there's a lot of blood
Yeah,
I'm missing.
yeah,
So
bleeding.
little of a pattern there.
Yes. So there was that one. That one I don't have as much clarity on, but I think it has to do with I knew I needed to significantly change the terms of the relationship that I was in, but I was afraid to do it. And I was being shown, you are bleeding life force. Your hip has broken. You feel like you can't move forward. You got to make some changes. So that was my next one. The one after that was
Wait. But did you have on the second one, do you have any remembrance of going out of your body or seeing anything at that point or not?
I do remember, like, I did go back and visit
Mhm.
in the same way that I did with the car accident. I don't think I got quite as close to death with that one, but I was above looking down on myself. And it's funny when I go back, I get to see details which have then checked out in 3D. So
I love that for all the skeptics.
yep, it's like bizarre. So I didn't remember really anything about and this one I had my memory back, my full memory back. This was
Good.
literally decades after the concussive incident. And I saw myself on the table and I saw my drapes and I saw my gown and I saw a picture of myself that my mom had in her camera roll and I was like, oh wow, same gown. But I had no conscious memory of that. So all these sort of like little confirmations that are weaving the fabric together, like closing the gap between my 3D and my 5D experience. So that one I don't think was as much of a um flash of consciousness the way that the car accident was, but it definitely stacked up in terms of my ability and willingness to foray into and towards the other side. The next one was sepsis. I made some, this was after I got divorced, and I made some choices that I thought I was asserting my freedom, but it were actually like really damaging to my soul. And I think inside myself, I was very ashamed, sad, and damaged. But on the outside, I was like, oh no, I'm a modern woman. I'm fine. And within a week, I went from I'm a modern woman and I'm fine to I'm not feeling so good. I might have bladder infection. And by the time I was like, I might have a bladder infection to being in the hospital inpatient was like 4 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep. So I manifested that super quick. I had called my GP and I was like, hey, can you just phone me some antibiotics? And she said, yes, but if you get a fever, chills, or any back pain, you need to go straight to the hospital. Like, don't even wait an hour. I'm like, yeah, no problem. So there I was like 2 hours later. And the sepsis came on from there. That time I was scared. I was scared because I was a little bit more lucid and I could feel again, it was sort of like a redo um of the car accident one. And one of the doctors was saying, come on, guys, come on. She has little kids. I was like, and I realized like the impact on other people. So I was like, wow, I have to be on a healing journey. I got really into like, um, I think I started with Louise Hay and Abraham Hicks. I joined a group. I'm like, I'm gonna tackle my health. So that was my next one. Um, in that one, I could feel the people who came before me. So dead relatives. Um, and not the dead relatives that one would think, like a direct grandparent who I actually knew. Didn't really see too much of them. These are people going back like generations. So I don't even know if she's a great grandmother or a great grandmother, but she has come through and interacted with you.
Mhm.
Um, so she was there to show me a pattern that I was repeating that's been going on in my family line for generations. And I got a little closer. I stepped a little bit more into unlimiting myself, which I think that is a big part of what NDEs can offer. So once we cross, there's no limits, right? We can literally do see, know anything.
Yeah.
But when we're in our physical body, we're like, oh, it's not logical. I don't know. I can't. And my last near-death experience, which was in 2019, I presented with a fever. So I had this fever and it would go up to like 103, 104. As you can see, I'm not a child. So it's like, it's sort of unprecedented to have that high of a fever for that long. So I have this fever and I'm taking Tylenol, I'm taking Advil, and that gets the fever to go away. But this moment it wears off, it comes back. So after I think like 6.5 weeks of this, I'm like, yeah, it was
Oh
pretty
my
bad.
God. You
Yep.
waited 6.5 weeks. I'm like,
I wanted
after
to be
three
sure it was
days.
real. So I wanted to be sure it was real. And then I also like I didn't want to go and have them be like, oh, you have a cold,
Yeah,
drink lots of water. Um, so I would just I would have this fever and then I'd sleep while my kids were at school. And then I would wake up it was pretty bad. In retrospect, I also realized that I didn't want to be sick and I was in resistance to it, and I didn't feel like I had the resources to really care for myself. Um, so I decided on a strategy of denial. So it didn't really work out. I went to the GP, they ran some tests, and then they called me on the back of the test and they were like, okay, we have your test results back. I'm like, great, what are we doing? They're like, we have no idea what's wrong with you. You got to go to the ER. I'm like, wait, what? For how long? And they're like, well, they may keep you. And I was like, I can't be kept in the hospital. I have two little kids. So my mother came. I went to the hospital. She kept the kids. And when I got to the hospital, they're like, okay, we're going to keep you. So I stayed inpatient and they were running tests and they said, we're going to take you off all meds and see what happens to your fever. And I was like, okay. So we took me off all meds and my fever went up and it started going up. And then I was like, it's 103.8. Are we, because they sort of have a hard stop at 104 because once it gets to 104, then it's like getting towards danger. And if it spikes even more, then you can have brain damage, seizures, death. So they're like, no, we're going to let it run. So as they let it run, I became more and more delirious and out of my body. And I was spoken to. They're like, you know what's happening. And I was like, wait, am I gonna die? Am I gonna die? And they're like, what are you here for? Like, what do you want to die? I'm like, no, I don't want to die. Like, how are we having this conversation? How would we think like, oh yeah, I might want to die? And they're like, what are you here for? And I said, I'm here for like, I have little kids. And they're like, that wasn't the question. And I was like, my parents would be devastated. They're like, that wasn't the question. And I was like, oh my God, all of the things that I'm saying I'm here for are in reference to other people. What am I here for? Oh my God, if I don't have an answer, like that's it. Do not think so. Like, am I out?
Oh my
Do I
God.
need to
The
think of something
pressure.
really? So the first time I was like, oh no. I had some resistance to dying. And they're like, you have to think about this. And I was like, no. I'm sorry. I'm thinking, I'm taking it seriously. And then I even remember thinking in the moment, am I resisting? And I said, if it's my time, like you can take me out, because obviously all of the referential things would be manifesting it from their point of view, right? So I don't need to manifest for them. I need to manifest for me. And anything that comes to them as a result is something that they're already energetically matched to. But that was what was the big one. What are you here for? Not in reference to someone else, but in reference to yourself. So I was like, okay, so are we good? Can I get a confirmation if I'm getting, guys, where are you? Come back, please. And I was worried.
Did you
Um,
see them, or was it just of a feeling of a collective, or did you see specific beings or lights, or how was that?
I
Was it
did
just
not
telepathic?
see an individual thing, but it was a definite conversation with something, with a force.
Wow. And you said guys, so it felt like more than one being.
So it probably was me talking to like my higher self, infinite wisdom, intelligence, God, whatever your word for it is. all of my ancestors who had come to support me, maybe throw in a few ascended masters, because I knew it was a really powerful turning point. So, at that point, I was nervous enough that I was actually going to be dying, that I wasn't like, excuse me, is that Saint Peter? Oh, sorry, no, my bad. Like, I wasn't super granular as to who was there. That grandmother, great great grandmother was there. For the benefit of those viewers, this is a great grandmother from the old country who was in an abusive marriage and shot her husband with a shotgun when he flew into an alcoholic rage and tried to beat her, not for the first time.
Oh,
So that's who often shows up for me. So that's the factual side of my near-death experiences. What questions do you have about like the impact or why or?
oh my gosh, so many questions. So the first question that comes to mind is, why do you feel that you have gone through four near-death experiences? I mean, lots of people go through one, and some two. But when someone has a repeated lesson of crossing over, coming back, or being in that space in between, do you uh, what do you think that's for? Like, or what do you think that's happening for you? Or why so many times?
Why?
Yes.
So I think there are two aspects. The first is that my 3D desire to find a structure and stick with it has historically been pretty strong. Dying provides you the contrast to sort of loosen that. Did I get the message the first time? No. No, I did not. So each time, iteratively, it has cracked things open on broader and broader way. I think you heard me say with the first near-death experience, I was angry. I was fighting against it. Didn't like God. It was not fair. I was mad. Why me? I mean, that can be true if I want it to be true. Or the opposite can be true. Wow, I was given this opportunity to experience things that other people didn't, that allow me to tap into something that most people haven't had the opportunity to access. We can all do it. I can now do it but I didn't have that ability right now. So that near-death experience was my personal bridge from the 3D into the further on. And each iterative time you hear me talk about how I see myself in relation to others, and then how it comes full circle back to why are you here?
Yeah, that's so powerful.
And that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is how that's impacted others. So one of my very good friends has had more health problems than I have, and like serious stuff, 2 cancer diagnoses, botched surgeries, all these things. And at some point, I think 3 years ago, she had been chronically unwell for a while, and she received a diagnosis of amyloidosis, which is, she was told, it's necessarily fatal, progressive illness. Amyloid protein is produced in your bone marrow, and when it sticks to certain parts of the body, then it diminishes function to the point that you don't make it. I believe dementia or Alzheimer's has amyloid protein as a feature. I think ALS also maybe. So it's a big deal. They said you may have anywhere from 3 months to 20 years. And she was like, wait, what? Can we narrow it down? They said, yes, we have to do more tests. So she was in the hospital. She was blown out of the water, horribly upset. So as it turned out, her fiance was supposed to pick her up from the hospital, but then couldn't. So I ended up picking her up from the hospital. We came back to the fiance's house and she said, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I said, hey, do you want me to read for you? And she's like, yes, anything. So we sit down. All of a sudden, her paternal grandmother is there, letting her know about family patterns and asking her, what are you doing? Where are you showing up for you? She's like, no, I have to be here for my daughter. And he said, no, not good enough. Is sounding familiar yet? She said, well, I'm engaged to be married. They're like, doesn't matter. She's like, well, my parents, I have to, they're like, nope, you. And that cracked everything open for her. And she was bawling. And we got some things from and about the grandmother that matched up to her 3D. I actually didn't know about this grandmother because that grandma died way before I knew her. And that set things in motion for her. And she started going to chemo. She started working on herself. We transitioned away from I need to work 24/7 and that's my job to I actually just need to heal myself. And in healing myself, I'm going to shine the light for others to heal. And she manifested some bacterial infections that made her ineligible for chemo for 4 months. So when she went for her 1-year review, she was terrified to see how much amyloid protein had built up. And they said, we don't know what to say. We have no medical explanation. Not only are your levels down, but you're presenting, your blood show like somebody who's never had this affliction in the first place. We've never seen this.
Oh.
So my near-death experience lit the torch. And I love the fire analogy for this because it lit the torch. And then I was able to light her torch, help her find that light in herself. I didn't lose anything. So I didn't end up with less, but I ended up with more because as a function of her being lit, there's more light in the world. I have my friend. It lights my path, lights my mission. It is just a wonderful feel-good story.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that miraculous story about the healing and how it connects when we do the inner healing and when we and that sentence, I think, if anything, for anyone who's watching, that one sentence to ask yourself, what about you? What are you doing here? What are you doing here? And to take away all of it. I'm the mother, I'm the wife, I'm the daughter, I'm the whatever employee or business, whatever. But it's like, who am I? Why am I actually here for? Like, to ask that question, I feel it's so powerful to really like look back, like, okay, what is it? Why am I here? And move through that energy that we very seldom get to see or get asked.
Yes, because many of us tend to get caught up in what's coming at us and allowing that to, in a way, define us. And
For sure.
I don't think any of us aspire to be a sandwich maker
Yeah,
or a little person chauffeur for kids. But that ends up being a lot of how we invest our time. So it's not to say that we have to throw that away, but to find joy in it, him getting to spend time with my kids. I realized that I'm not loving making these sandwiches and getting up early, but I am loving providing nutrition. I am providing the security of knowing that they have a lunch that they actually like and they are going to eat, rather than like, oh, it was chicken patties and I hate the chicken patties, I'm not going to eat them. So realizing my own contribution and feeling good about that in myself because I am that person, not because I have to from the external. It's very nuanced, but it, if that makes sense.
It does completely make sense. And I'm looking here at the clock and it says 11:11. I'm like, thank you for that confirmation. Because what was coming through as you were speaking about this, making the sandwiches for your children and seeing the light or the joy in whatever it is that you're doing in your everyday life is the key to finding joy in your moment, right? In your present
Yes.
moment. That so many people feel like, oh, I don't have a degree, or I'm no longer working, or whatever it is that we attach our worth to.
Yes.
But it is in those little moments, the present moment, little things that we do every day to make yourself and others more joyful. That's really what counts in bringing yourself to being joyful, happy, fulfilled.
Yes. And I do want to stress that doing things that provide value are also doing things for you. So, the way I was raised, oh, a mother should never, speaking just theoretically, do breath work in her car before a children's soccer game, which could potentially make her miss the kickoff. In my world, of course she should, because that's going to allow her to be more stable, more grounded, more able to support her child, more able to enjoy the game. And it's part of a bigger microcosm. And when we're looking at why we might make the decision to not choose ourselves, to not honor our where we're being told what's best for us, it's generally for a serving an outdated structure.
Yeah, it's
Because
like
really,
it's the feeling.
if I'm supposed to be there for the kickoff, it'll be delayed by 30 seconds, right?
Yeah. I was gonna say it's like the filling my cup first before I can fill yours.
Yes, yes, exactly. And realizing that me having a full cup for the sole purpose of me having a soul, like my cup is worth everything to me. And not filling it so I can do this for others, or so that I can do that, or so that others can see me, but just because it feels nice to have a full cup and I deserve that, um, is sort of a big part of the full circle that my NDEs have brought me to. Am I living that? Yeah, sometimes. And I'm trying and I'm aware of it. And I do feel like I'm getting iteratively closer to the level that I want to achieve.
Amazing. So you brought up the story with your friend that you started reading for her. So tell us a little bit more about how you began to do this. How did you begin to connect with the other side, to do readings, to use your intuition? Is this something that came through your NDEs, or like how did that take place for you?
Interesting question. I always thought that it was not real and
Uh-huh.
something that was very woo-woo. I've studied a lot of math and statistics, so I kind of put my stock in that. And things that were not known and measurable were simply not real. So I came in with a lot of baggage, very resistant to it. I also didn't want to be an intuitive or anything weird or witchy, because I saw that as incompatible with the image that I wanted to be creating. So I didn't see someone with tarot cards as someone who you might ask, like, oh, is that Prada? And I was very much, oh, is that Prada? Now I realize it can be both. So as part of my healing, I began to receive energy healing, specifically Reiki and things of that nature, some craniosacral therapy. And at a certain point, I decided to become attuned. And so I got attuned to the first level. And they told me there was this protocol. You were supposed to like live the 5 principles, not hurt things, just for today, not be angry, be present, and all this. And I'm not gonna lie, I struggled to perform Reiki on myself for an hour a day, which was prescription. And after like the 3rd or 4th day, I was like, you know what? Forget it. I'm going to do as much Reiki as I can per day. And if that's 5 minutes, it's 5 minutes, but I am going to show up. The following day, I had my first mediumship experience. I was very against mediumship, and I didn't like it. I didn't want it, actively resisted it. Nope, not me. And it came to me in an odd way. So I was weeding in the garden. So I was doing something, but it didn't require mental concentration. And I started having this conversation in my head with a friend's mother. And I was like, what the heck, is this real? So the mother wanted me to say stuff to the friend about that friend's brother and a situation in that he should go there. And I was like, I can't, this is not a me thing. This isn't real. All of a sudden, I was flooded with emotion. I was very scared. And I was like, how is this possible? I'm weeding. This isn't matching up. So all of this stuff. And I realized, like, oh my gosh, I'm talking to dead people. This is not okay. Very nervous. So that was my first really big one, and where I actually accepted. I told them about it, and I was able to say some things about the mom that she died before I knew him. So I was able to use some phrasings that she often uses. She's from a geographically different part of the country than I am. So I used some of the phrasing that she would have used that is not native to beautiful Boston. And that was the big open up. I still don't like mediumship.
So wait, so you got the download, or you spoke to this
Yep.
entity, and then you actually went and delivered it?
Yeah. Yep. I actually went and delivered it.
What gave you the courage to do that?
Um, Courage and stubbornness has not been my thing to work on. I'm rarely nervous that people are going to judge me. And if they do, that's a them thing. So I just spit it all out. I did not doubt myself, and this is what it is. If he didn't want to take it, or if I got something wrong, that's a him thing. So that sort of opened it up. And once that opened up, then all of a sudden, just in passing, dead people started coming to me. Like, I was talking to another friend from South Africa, and we were wrapping up our conversation, and I was like, something weird is happening, and I'm just gonna say it to you. But I can't make sense of it. I was like, there's a guy, um, like with an Australian accent who was talking to me, and it definitely has to do with you, but I am not from Australia, neither are you. And my friend said, "Oh, what's he saying?" And he's like, really like look after mom, and I'm sorry. And he's like, that would be my brother. He died in New Zealand. And I was like,
Wow.
yeah. So I didn't even know I got the Australia, New Zealand thing wrong. I'm American, so I can't tell the difference. I don't even know if they can tell the difference, but whatever. So things just started coming into my reality to affirm, hey, you can do this. So then I was like, I'm not okay with mediumship. I don't want to do it. I can use, I can, I already read cards at that point, but I can tap into the feeling side, not just the knowing side, but the feeling side, because claircognizance is my strongest gift. Um, and then I also started reading the Akashic Records and opening to channel. So that was an interesting experience. Opening to channel with somebody else. So choosing a trusted friend and saying, I'm going to shut my conscious mind off. You ask me whatever you want, and we'll see what comes through. And I'm now to a point where I can go back and forth between conscious mind and unconscious mind pretty quickly, where I don't have to do the whole candle lighting, grounding, and things. I can just.
Uh-huh.
And I do
Amazing.
think the near-death experience, like the sort of going there, going back, it's hard to use English words to describe, but I think when we segue towards death and when we read, we access different dimensions, not in our physical body place, but within the time-space continuum. And that a near-death experience can sort of force you into that so that you can go more often. Like you get the muscle memory spiritually and energetically that allows you to be able to access that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. So have each one of your gifts that you are in tune with now, do you feel they have just come in like one after the other, like just happening as needed, or how's that opening up for you?
I think the healing gift, I looked for it and I took action in my attunement and it came to me. I think the other gifts sort of came to me. So they presented as an opportunity. So for instance, the weeding and mediumship experience. Um, the there have been several other, I don't know, weird things just happen where I end up at my fitness studio, for instance, one of the instructors, I could just feel she was going through a very hard time. And I said, hey, are you all right? She's like, I'm all right. And I could just feel like emotionally and physically like concrete in her chest space. And I said, okay, I mean, if you want to talk about it sometimes, it's easier to do that with someone who doesn't know the backstory. And she was like, yeah, just everything is falling apart. And I said, it may feel like it right now, but and I said everything. I was like, so I didn't know anything about her personal life. And I was like, the problem with you and that guy was you were not yourself. Like you have a highly emotional nature, and like he was shutting that down. And I was like, you're gonna meet someone new. You're gonna meet him at work. And he's gonna actually love that emotional nature, but you have to stop rejecting it first. And I was like, and you're gonna have a new job. Like money is not a thing, but you got to get out of your own way. Just like it's like you're in the birth canal right now. And it's really dark, but that's what happened. Bye, have a nice day. Okay, take care. And I left. And it wasn't like she came to me. It wasn't like I was looking for her. It just happened. And we had a couple like follow-on conversations, and wisdom flowed through again. And one morning I was walking to barre, the exercise class, and as I was crossing the street, I was like, oh, she got another job. And I went upstairs. She was like, guess what? I was like, you got another job? Are you leaving? And she was like, oh, someone told you? I was like, no. I mean, yeah, but no. And then like 2 months later, she was like, I arrived and I arrived to class, and on my way in again, I was like, oh, she met the guy. And when I got there, she wasn't there. And I was like, oh, maybe I got it wrong. And so I asked the person who was subbing for her, I was like, oh, where's Megan? And they're like, oh, so there's this guy. And I was like, yeah. So it doesn't, it comes to me.
Can you turn it off, or is it just open, whatever to whomever? Like, what do you do about that?
I can turn it off. I've gotten better at turning it off, because back in the old days when people are we're just, especially like mediumship coming at me, it was somewhat disruptive.
Yeah.
So yes, I've learned to turn it off. I'm like, nope, not right now, not a me thing. Most of the time it's better balanced at this point, so I don't have and I sort of gauge the person. So there are some people that stuff comes through and I'm like, yeah, no. Because it doesn't have to be me. We're all part of the infinite quantum intelligence. So if I don't, someone else will. And I don't have to sacrifice myself in order, like, I'm not saving people.
I love that. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things when most of us begin this type of work or waking up and becoming aware, is that, oh my gosh, this is amazing, and I need to save everybody when everybody's not here to be saved by you or by us.
Yes, exactly. Or make my identity predicated on my ability to save people when people have to save or be open to saving themselves.
Yeah.
Can I help them with energy? Can I hold a mirror and reflect their own light back at them? Absolutely. But did they need to know? Not for me.
Amazing. This has been such an amazing, eye-opening conversation. How can people get in touch with you?
People can reach out to me on Facebook.
Okay.
I'm a messenger. I'm Kristen Bell.
Bell. Why did I say Becker? I said Becker at the beginning. You didn't say anything.
Well, because Becker is my actual last name and Bell is my last name for Facebook. I try to really segregate my 3D world so that I am really curating my online experiences to minimize the impact of the less advantageous parts of 3D that might come at one from social media.
Sorry.
Yep.
I'll put your information in the show notes so people can get in touch with you if they feel connected or they want to talk to you about their experiences or anything else.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you. This has been real.
Yes, amazing. I had so much fun. It felt like the conversation was like just started, but it's been a while. So
Indeed.
thank you so much for coming and sharing your story and for being vulnerable in this space and sharing all the parts that you shared today with us.
Thank you.
And with that, I'll let you go. Bye.